The biggest lie about retirement is not that you need $1 million. It's that retirement is supposed to happen at the end. At the end of your energy. At the end of your nerve. At the end of your curiosity. At the end of your body's best years. After the deadlines. After the promotions. After the kids grow up. After the mortgage. After the market cooperates. After you've finally earned the right to own your own time. That story sounds responsible. Mature. Adult. It is also one of the most dangerous stories modern life ever sold people. Because if you really think about what you're being told, it's insane. Work through your strongest decades so you can be free in the years when freedom costs more physically, emotionally, and biologically to use. Delay your life until the version of you that finally gets it is no longer the version with the same appetite for risk, movement, reinvention, travel, building, starting over, falling in love with the world again. People call this normal because they hear it all the time. But repetition does not make a bad deal wise. Retiring earlier than you think is not about escaping effort. It's not about beach chairs, lottery fantasies, or proving you hate work. It's about recognizing that the way most people plan their lives is backwards. They assume money is the scarce resource and time will wait. In reality, money can be earned, invested, rebuilt, and adapted. But the kind of time you have at 42 is not the kind of time you have at 67. The kind of health you have at 38 is not the kind of health you have at 71. The kind of courage you have when your identity is still flexible does not survive decades of institutional domestication untouched. And that's why you should seriously consider retiring earlier than you think. Not someday. Earlier than you think. The first reason is brutally simple. Your useful years and your living years are not the same thing. People talk about longevity like it solved the problem. Life expectancy went up, so apparently the answer is obvious. Work longer. But more years alive does not automatically mean more years alive in the way you imagine. More birthdays is not the same as more full capacity years. There is a difference between being alive and being able to use your freedom the way you dreamed you would. A lot of people build retirement fantasies around a body they won't have. They picture hiking across countries, learning new skills, taking long trips, starting passion projects, being physically adventurous, emotionally available, mentally fresh. But by the time many people get there, what they mostly want is less pain, less stress, fewer appointments, and a manageable week. Not because they failed. Because reality changed the terms. This is not pessimism. It's timing. If you ask someone whether they'd rather own a beautiful sports car at 28 or 82, the question sounds ridiculous, because everyone instantly understands that value is context dependent. The thing is worth more when you can use it fully. Freedom works the same way. A free Tuesday means something radically different at 40 than it does at 75. 6 months of open time means something different when your knees work, your parents are still alive, your friends are available, your children still want your presence, your mind is restless, and your world still feels expandable. People act as if delayed freedom keeps its original value. It doesn't. Freedom decays when postponed too long. And that alone should change how you think about retirement. Because if the best years to own your time are not the last years, then the standard model is not prudent. It is misallocated. It is taking a premium asset and delivering it late. The second reason is more uncomfortable. Most people don't actually need to retire late. They need permission to stop performing an expensive identity. This is where the conversation gets real. A huge number of people are not trapped by math. They're trapped by a version of themselves they got used to financing. The upgraded neighborhood. The second car that signals progress. The private school no one wants to question. The vacations that feel less like joy and more like proof. The house with rooms nobody sits in. The subscriptions, upgrades, dining habits, clothing expectations, and quiet status payments that accumulate around professional life like barnacles on a ship. Then one day they run the numbers and say, I can't possibly retire early. Maybe. Or maybe the life you think you can't afford to leave is the exact life that made freedom unaffordable. That's the trap. Modern careers don't just pay you. They train your standard of normal upward until walking away feels like social death. Your expenses become your identity in costume. And once that happens, every extra year of work feels necessary, even when it's mostly supporting a life architecture built to keep you in place. You see it all the time. Someone earning far more than they once dreamed of still feels behind. Not because they're irrational, but because lifestyle inflation is not just financial. It's psychological. The more your role becomes your self-concept, the more expensive it feels to step back from it. You're no longer funding comfort. You're funding continuity. You're paying to avoid the disorientation of becoming someone else. But here's the hard reframe. Retirement is not primarily a savings problem. It is a consumption and identity problem wearing a savings costume. A person who can live well on less has more freedom than a person who earns twice as much and needs almost all of it to maintain their image. A person who learned to separate dignity from visible success has an escape hatch. A person who didn't may keep working long after the work stopped being worth the life it consumes. Retiring earlier than you think often begins with a humiliatingly simple realization. You do not need your current life as much as your current life needs you to believe you do. And once you see that, the equation changes fast. The third reason is that work does something to people that they rarely notice while it's happening. It narrows them. Not always dramatically. Usually quietly. A career starts as opportunity, then becomes routine, then becomes structure, then becomes identity, then, if you're not careful, becomes obedience with better furniture. You stop measuring the years by whether they were fully lived and start measuring them by whether you remained employable, promotable, and legible inside systems that were never designed around your deepest interests. Your calendar gets optimized. Your language gets professionalized. Your risk tolerance drops. Your imagination becomes practical. You stop asking, what would make a beautiful life? And start asking, what's the sensible next step? Do that for 20 years and something subtle but devastating can happen. You become excellent at continuing. And terrible at choosing. This is one of the strongest reasons to retire earlier than you think. Not because work is evil. Because extended dependence on structured institutions can erode the part of you that knows what to do with freedom when it finally arrives. People assume they'll work until 67 and then effortlessly become fully alive. But freedom is not a switch. It's a muscle. Choice is a muscle. Unstructured meaning is a muscle. Self-authored living is a muscle. If you spend decades never training those muscles, don't be surprised if retirement feels strangely hollow when it comes. That's why so many people don't actually retire into joy. They retire into disorientation. They thought they were postponing labor. What they were really postponing was the harder task of building a self outside of labor. And when the job finally disappears, there's an eerie question waiting for them. If nobody needs my output on Monday, who exactly am I? Earlier retirement gives you a better chance to answer that question while you still have elasticity. While reinvention is still metabolically easier. While learning new rhythms doesn't feel like rebuilding from rubble. It gives you time to become a person, not just an employee with hobbies. The fourth reason is one most people resist because it sounds almost rude. The institutions around you benefit when you retire late. Of course they do. Your employer benefits from your prime years. The economy benefits from your productivity. Entire industries are built around keeping you spending, commuting, upgrading, borrowing, aspiring, and staying inside the cycle. Even the cultural stories you're fed are suspiciously convenient. Hard work becomes moral purity. Busyness becomes prestige. Exhaustion becomes evidence of seriousness. Delayed enjoyment becomes virtue. And if you question the timeline, you risk sounding unserious, entitled, lazy, unrealistic, or ungrateful. Notice how powerful that framing is. You are allowed to burn out respectably. You are allowed to become cynical respectably. You are allowed to miss your children's weekdays respectably. You are allowed to spend your healthiest years inside fluorescent urgency respectably. But if you say, I want my time back while I can still truly use it, suddenly people act like you're confessing a character flaw. That should tell you something. A system is easiest to see when your natural interests conflict with its preferred outcome. And the preferred outcome is obvious. Keep the capable adults in motion for as long as possible. Keep them producing. Keep them consuming. Keep them worried enough to comply and comfortable enough not to revolt. Keep retirement distant, abstract, and endlessly conditional. This doesn't require a conspiracy. Just incentives. The result is a society full of people who have been taught to fear early freedom more than late regret. That is insane. You should be far more afraid of reaching your 60s with money but no appetite, no flexibility, no close relationships, no practice self-direction, and a body that negotiates with you before doing ordinary things. You should be more afraid of becoming rich in the wrong currency. More afraid of winning the financial game after losing the human one. Retiring earlier than you think is one way of refusing that trade. Not because you're above work. Because you finally understand what work has been asking for in exchange. The fifth reason is the deepest one. Early retirement is not really about stopping. It's about recovering choice before life makes your choices for you. That's the part almost everyone misses. When people hear retire early, they imagine absence. No job. No structure. No ambition. But the people who do this well are not retiring from life. They are retiring from compulsion. They are stepping out of the condition where every major decision has to route through income maintenance first. That changes everything. You choose work differently when you don't need every paycheck. You choose where to live differently. You choose your relationships differently. You choose your health differently. You choose what risks are worth taking. You choose whether to care for a parent yourself instead of outsourcing the guilt. You choose whether to spend more afternoons with your kids before they become adults who no longer live in your house. You choose whether to build something small and meaningful instead of optimizing for status. You choose whether your days are arranged around meetings or attention. You choose whether your mind belongs to you in the morning. That's not retirement in the old sense. That's sovereignty. And sovereignty gets more valuable as the world gets more volatile. Jobs are less stable than they look. Industries mutate faster than loyalty can keep up. Entire career ladders vanish. Health events arrive without checking your 5-year plan. Parents age. Marriages change. Children need versions of you that a career cannot always spare. The fantasy that you'll stay in control long enough to retire right on schedule is exactly that, a fantasy. Life does not honor your timeline because your spreadsheet was sincere. That's why earlier matters. Earlier gives margin. Earlier gives maneuverability. Earlier gives you years in which you can still respond creatively to reality instead of just enduring it. It turns retirement from a finish line into a strategic widening of options. And no, this does not mean everyone should quit tomorrow, sell everything, and posture as enlightened minimalists on the internet. That's just another performance. The point is not impulsiveness. The point is correction. Correction in what you optimize for. Correction in what you call success. Correction in how many years of your only life you are willing to spend buying a future version of freedom that may arrive altered, diminished, or too late. Think about the people you know who are supposedly doing everything right. Many of them are exhausted. Not poor. Not failing. Exhausted. They are running a life that looks successful from the outside and feels strangely inaccessible from the inside. They tell themselves this is temporary. Once they hit the next number. Once they vest. Once the kids are older. Once the market improves. Once the bonus lands. Once the house is paid off. Always once. But life has a way of turning once into a permanent operating system. And that's how decades disappear. Not in disaster. In deferment. One more year. Then another. Then a promotion you didn't ask for but can't refuse. Then an obligation. Then a diagnosis. Then a parent needs help. Then your child is suddenly 17. Then your own energy is no longer casually renewable. Then you look up and realize you protected the future so diligently that the present never really got a turn. That is not wisdom. That is drift with good PR. So if you've been told retirement is something you earn only after you've given away your sharpest years, question that. If you've been taught that stopping early means thinking too small, question that. If you've quietly felt that the math of modern success seems to require too much life for too little aliveness, trust that discomfort. It may be the sanest thing in you. Because the real point of money is not to die with proof that you were disciplined. The real point is to purchase control over your days. And if control over your days is the point, then waiting too long to buy it is not noble. It's expensive. Retire earlier than you think, not because life is easy, but because it isn't. Not because work has no dignity, but because your life has more. Not because you owe the world less, but because you may owe yourself a version of freedom that arrives while you can still feel it in your bones. The goal was never to stop moving. The goal was to stop having to ask permission to live.